Hey guys, hope you had a good weekend. Today we are going to look at our last topic for you guys, and that is fiscal policy. So, fiscal policy is all the ways basically that money is acquired and then used by the government. Okay, and so that's obviously a big part of um, kind of how the government operates. It's a big part of how we vote on, hey, this is how we want to see fiscal policy. And so, obviously, a big part of fiscal policy is taxes. So, like we've talked about, Article 1 of the Constitution gives Congress the power to tax. Uh, and taxes are the main source of money for the government. There are other ways the government gets money, guys. Some of that's through what we've talked about with the executive branch, like cooperatives. Um, Corporations, okay, things like that, authorities, where they are controlled, owned by the federal government, and the government is providing some kind of service, and it makes money off of that. So it can make a little money from that. When the police arrest people, they might impound their vehicles or things like that and all that, and then they auction them off if it was used in the crime and things like that. So repossession and things like that, essentially, where it can make money from that. But the biggest is through taxes, which probably makes sense. So the Congress's tax power to tax, guys, it is limited. They can't just make any kind of tax. So the Constitution clearly places four specific limits on the power to tax. So when Congress taxes, it can only tax for public purposes, not for private. So it can't create a tax that's going to fund Walmart or Target. It has to be for public purposes. Uh, Taxes cannot be placed on exports. So if I am an exporter, if I am shipping goods overseas, they cannot tax me for that. Okay, they can tax imports, but they can't tax exports. Direct taxes must be evenly collected according to population. So a direct tax would be like the income tax, and it is evenly collected. We'll kind of talk about what that exactly means, but everyone has to pay income tax. It's not Bob pays income tax, Sally doesn't. Okay. Uh, and then indirect taxes levied by the federal government must be the same rate for all parts of the country. So indirect tax would be like a tax on, say, gasoline. So the federal government cannot put a 30 cents tax on gasoline in Kansas, but put a 60-cent tax per gallon on gasoline in California. Now, guys, where you are, that's a big part of determining how much you pay for fuel, and some of that is through taxes, but that's also at the state level. Okay, so fuel in California is going to be more expensive, but that's because at the state level, not federal government collecting taxes on that. Okay, so that would be an example of what we're talking about. So current federal taxes, guys, obviously the big one is income tax that I just referenced. That is a direct tax. So right now, how our income tax works is it's known as a progressive tax, meaning the higher a person's income, the higher the taxes they paid. Okay, so that is part of that, guys. And also part of our income tax is the rates can be changed as the government needs. So a couple years ago, President Trump, he lowered the income tax rates, so people got bigger returns, and so they can alter that and change that. It doesn't have to come from an act passed by Congress. Employers, guys, they withhold usually a certain amount of money from your paycheck for income tax. Obviously, you need to check and make sure that's what's going on before you just go and spend all your money and then turn around and file your taxes and they say, oh, you owe the federal government X amount of money. So you need to be making sure that you still might owe money if they didn't withhold enough. Um, that just depends. But you definitely don't want to assume that your um, part of your paycheck is going to that and then not have enough money to pay your taxes at the end of the year. But that's typically how it works. Okay, and then at the end of the year, you have to file a tax return. If your employer withheld enough, you will receive a refund if they withheld more than you had to. Um, and if your employer did not withhold enough, then you'll have to pay the difference. Okay. Um, and so personal income tax, guys, produces the largest amount of taxes for the federal government. That's where most of our federal government's money comes from. Okay, and so when we talk about laws and things and making sure the government's doing what it's supposed to be doing and being efficient, that's why we talk about those things, is because a lot of what they're doing is coming from our money. And so I don't know about you guys, but I want them to be efficient with my money and be as effective as possible with my money. Okay, so that does it for our first video over fiscal policy of the government. Have a good week, guys. We'll talk to you later.